The one thing I love about being here, and I knew it when I took the job, is there's pressure. But I always tell them pressure's a privilege and preparation trumps pressure.
Good evening. Welcome to Zips Nation Insider. My name's Jacob Farrar. I got Grant Bogdan with me tonight. Grant, we want to do a little instant reaction to the Zips football game, kind of leading into part two of our interview with John Groce. Our guest today is going to be John Groce. It's the second part of our interview from last week, but we did want to do an update on Zip Sports over the weekend. And so the goal tonight was, well, we come on instant reaction. The Zips are playing their football game. It's Maction, their first Maction, hoping for a win. We'll get an instant reaction, but not so much. No.
No, unfortunately, it didn't go the way we wanted to. Terrible conditions out there at Northern Illinois. I think it was raining sideways for a good majority of that game. But just like last week, really couldn't play a complete game. You know, it was that first half where the Zips scored all 16 of their points. We had that blocked punt, which was awesome, recovered for a touchdown. And then Adrian Norton continues to be a big piece of this offense, getting a deep touchdown as well. But scored all 16 points in the first half, like I said, and couldn't really get anything going from there. So ended up dropping it 16-29, and they're going to have a chance next week against Kent State to bring home the wagon wheel to try to turn things around and salvage the season.
Yeah, it was not a lot of redeeming situations on the field. I think the block punt by Noel Roach, and then picked up the touchdown by Terrence Thomas. But special teams was miserable. There was, on both sides of the ball. I'll be honest, it wasn't even fun to watch because the rain was blocking the camera, so you couldn't even really watch the game. So yeah, it wasn't the most exciting. I don't know, as far as Zips fans go, they probably actually the players like to do that one again, maybe in better weather, because it was just kind of miserable to both watch and then just see how the weather was just affecting what was going on the field. So not a lot to write home about with that game. So let's transition from that to something that is good news, and that's the soccer team, the men's soccer team. Great win on Saturday, the quarterfinal, first round, so to speak, of the Big East soccer tournament. Played DePaul, won that game 3-1. How many goals did our good friend Emil Jaskalainen have?
2. He's almost a guaranteed at least 2 goals every game. This is actually his ninth game in a row that he's had multiple goals.
Really? I didn't know that. Ninth game.
To my knowledge, I think he's still the nation's leading scorer, if I'm correct. I don't think that's changed.
Yeah.
And then here's another stat you might not know. But he's now second in the Akron record books for soccer for single season goals. So he's coming first place spot.
Yeah, actually, I think I knew that particular one. I didn't know what the number was, but I think it was 20 before, right? So this 21 is put him into.
I think it was 21-22 in this last game he's at. So
okay. So is it 22 that put him?
I'm not sure how many more he needs, but I know he's right there to get that number 1 spot, which would be awesome to finish out the year.
Sure, that's great. There was so the final score was 3-1. I was there. That one goal that DePaul had was terrible. Like, it wasn't. I felt bad for Mitch Butler because it was just a weak goal. It was. I don't think it was late in the second half, or at least in the second half. I was hoping for a shutout for him to kind of continue that little streak, but definitely they dominated the entire match. Like, it wasn't really in question at all.
Really, the second time they've done that to DePaul as well. They beat him 3-0 earlier in the year, and obviously getting win in the quarterfinals. They advance to the semis where they're going to take on Georgetown out in Maryland. So that's going to be their next test and looking to advance further into the Big East tournament.
And there were some awards this week. Actually, I think yesterday is on Tuesday. We're recording here on Wednesday night. By the way, you're listening to Zips Nation Insider, powered by the Fear the Root Collective and Bryant Heating and Cooling. So we're recording this again right after the Zips win on Wednesday, or loss, sorry. I was hoping for the win on Wednesday, projecting. But I think yesterday or today, they announced some of the Big East. We had 3 players, actually 4 players on the first team, but Jaskalainen was Offensive Player of the Year, Mitch Butler was Goalkeeper of the Year, and Beto Idrak was Defender of the Year. So you can't get really any better than that. from the soccer team. Excited to see what happens. They play Thursday, so again, we're recording on Wednesday, Thursday night, 7:30 against Georgetown. If you remember correctly, we beat them 1-0 back in September. So, I mean, I think this is going to be, again, we're in a tournament. They won their first round, so it's not, again, a cakewalk, but as well as the Zips are playing, I mean, I think they have a good shot to make it to the final. So fingers crossed.
Anything can happen. Anything can happen, but I like our chances the way they're playing now.
Yeah. So I guess basketball's also been in session. We've had a number more games since the last time we recorded our interview with Coach Groce last week. So men's played last night against St. Mary's. St. Mary's isn't, they're a mid-major, but man, they're actually predicted to be one of the top mid-majors in the country. So playing in that, I guess, is it still the West Coast Conference? I don't even know, since Gonzaga is now in the Pac-12 or whatever that's going to be. But St. Mary's is a good team.
I think it's to the West Coast, but that's a good team. That's a great program historically, and I think they have 2 or 3 7-footers on that team. I mean, they had a lot of size, and I think it was just really hard for our guys to match up with them. Lost the first couple of these non-conference games, Arkansas State and St. Mary's, but no better opportunity than to get back on the right track as they have the Akron Basketball Classic here coming up.
That's in a week, next weekend. A couple high notes from the game. They had 13 3-pointers. Feels like everyone was hitting threes the other night. It's funny, before we went on with Coach Groce, oh man, I'm kind of remembering who. One of the guys was just practicing his 3-pointers. And I was thinking, as they were hitting them in the game, I go, man, that's kind of, they're practicing, hitting those long range buckets. I'm trying to remember who it was now.
I want to say Armani Lyles was one of the people.
I think it was him. And he was hitting them during the game too. I don't remember how many he had, but he was definitely, there's a few times where he was hitting some of those. So maybe that extra practice worked a little bit. Not enough to get the win, but I mean, they came back. They were in it until probably the last 5 minutes of the game. Halftime, it was a good game to watch, but again, a little frustrating that the outcome didn't go the way we wanted to. So, and then Zips women's basketball, they weren't the football team wasn't the only team to play tonight. The Zips women team, they had a loss to Robert Morris, 59-53. I think the only bright spot in that one was Shelby Brown, who is a transfer from Memphis. Double, 15 points, 10 rebounds. And then they play this Saturday, right? They play this Saturday.
Cleveland State this Saturday, yep.
All right, anything else about those sports, about basketball that no, I mean, it's early in the season. Basketball's off for, again, until next weekend. So there's some home games. I think there's 3 other teams coming in. Lamar, Nebraska, Omaha, and Alabama State are all coming in to be part of that Akron Basketball Classic. So plenty of basketball. If you're a Zips fan, want to see the team, there'll be a lot of chances, again, next weekend with that Akron Basketball Classic. Before we go, though, I want to say something. This weekend on Monday, or I guess earlier this week, former head coach Jerry Faust passed away at age 89. He was head coach here at Akron from 1986 to 1994. This is before my time on campus, so I don't really know him that well. I knew of him, but mainly it was because of his time at Notre Dame. He was a head football coach at Notre Dame before coming to Akron. But the kind of unique thing about that was he went straight from coaching high school to coaching at Notre Dame. Like, that is not done nowadays. Coaching a high school and then going straight into being the head football coach, especially Notre Dame. So thoughts with his family. I guess after he was no longer the coach, he was still kind of a fixture on campus, worked a lot with the fundraising efforts, and then would come to basketball games. Matter of fact, there's a quote from Coach Groce about Coach Faust. So definitely a fixture on campus. I think there's a lot of people that will miss him. Definitely was a mainstay here in Akron. So our thoughts are with his family. Again, for part 2, that's what we have coming up next with our interview with Coach John Groce. This was a great interview. We had such a fun time doing it. We wanted to turn it into two episodes. So again, this is Zips Nation Insider, powered by Fear the Root Collective and Bryan Heating and Cooling. And again, our guest was Coach John Groce. That's courtesy of Tire Source, the official sponsor of the Turnover Tire, which we had. We had a turnover tonight. That's a bright spot.
We did.
Turnover. So the Turnover Tire made its presence known tonight in the Zips loss, unfortunately. But all right, thanks, Grant, and we'll be back next week.
See you next time. Go Zips.
All right, we're here on Zips Nation Insider with Coach John Groce, head basketball coach of the Zips men's basketball team. Coach Groce, welcome to Zips Nation Insider.
Thank you, Jacob. It's great to be on Zips Nation Insider.
You are a big fan of Zips Nation.
I am. Huge fan of Zips Nation.
I mean, I don't know how many press conferences you talk about the influence of Zips Nation, and so it's great to have you here on this podcast. You know, I feel like one of the things that we want to do on this show is to be kind of a voice of the fans, right? I feel almost like a sacred responsibility to represent the fans of not just the basketball team, but all of the sports here on campus. So when I was thinking about questions to ask you, it really was, there's a lot that people probably want to know, right? You've been here since 2017, but there's still probably things that people don't want to know that don't know the answers to. So I put together a list of questions, did some research, but I have a lot.
Awesome.
So I think what we might do to start this off, we've not done this before. I call it Coach's Roulette. I'm going to give you a number between 1 and 23. That's how many questions I got.
Is this like the hot seat,
This is 1 to
type
23.
of deal?
Now, some of these questions I may have to
Okay.
ask a pre-question because they may fall on each
Sure.
other. But between 1 and 23, like this is how I think I want to start today.
Between 1 and 23.
So we're not going to get to all of them. But I thought this would be kind of a fun way to start this episode or your interview with just kind of starting wherever. You give me a number between 1 and 23.
You ready for the number?
Yeah.
Here's why I'm giving you the number. And I've promised my daughter at some point
Okay.
she will see Taylor Swift.
Okay.
We're going to go with 22.
22.
Yeah, 22.
Oh, this is good. This is a good one.
22.
Okay. So, good. This is a good one to start off with.
Okay.
And it kind of plays on to Zips Nation. So you often mention kind of it takes a village to be successful in a program. So how do you, or at least in your mind, the impact of the fans, both those that are students and those that are non-students, how do they play into this idea of the village?
Oh, it's huge. I think back to when we started in 17, and we had the AK Rowdies, obviously,
Sure.
at that point in time, but they were kind of spread out throughout the building.
Yeah.
And here the last couple years in particular, maybe 3, it's just grown.
Yes.
The student section has grown. It has ballooned. And we love going over to them, as you've seen us
Yes, absolutely.
do so many times
Yeah.
after games and acknowledge them. It makes the environment in here completely different when they're rowdy like that. It's awesome. So they're a huge part of Zips Nation. Obviously, our season ticket holders,
Sure.
That list has grown over the time that we've been here as well, are a big part of that. But the home court here has been special for us, and we've had a lot of success at home. And our students have been a huge part of that, as have our season ticket holders. So it's great.
So thinking about, now, one thing that I found fascinating about you that I did not know about, you were a math major.
That
in
is
college.
correct.
A math major. So we're going to have a couple questions about that. But when you look at the influence that goes into a game, like if you were to put it into an equation, that weight of the fans, like where does that fit? I mean, can you even quantify?
A lot of points.
A lot of points.
Yeah. No, it's funny you mentioned the mathematics because I'm huge into analytics.
So I was going to ask you about that. Okay.
Huge
Okay.
into analytics. And, it's interesting with the math background, right? And I taught math. So there's a part of basketball that's almost like jazz or dancing.
Sure.
That's more subjective, fluid. It's a flow thing. And then there's the parts that are more analytical,
Sure.
objective data that we have to take a look at. I think, when you watch the game and coach the game, for me, you have to balance the two. So a buddy of mine, Dave Thorpe, who writes for ESPN, trains a lot of pros, says basketball is jazz.
Okay.
Which gets
okay.
more on the creative
Sure.
right brain side of basketball, where you're watching it subjectively. It's kind of a feel thing, chemistry maybe of a certain unit that's playing well, versus the objective data. You can't ignore that either.
Sure.
So you have to look at both, and we try to do that. But back to your original question, because I went on a tangent there, right? They're worth a lot of points.
Yeah. I mean, again, your acknowledgement of them in press conferences, win or lose, you're coming over to the student section. And you're right, it shifted from, we're in the jar. It used to be behind the basket to the side, which was able to have more people, more students be part of it. Explain to those that may have not have been to a Kent-Akron game here in the jar how crazy of an atmosphere that is.
It's awesome. I mean, it's awesome to coach in that game. It's a privilege. I always tell the players to play in it. It's a privilege for us to coach in it. I've been like the luckiest guy in the world if you think about the rivalries that I've had a chance to be a part of as a coach. NC State, Carolina, Xavier, Cincinnati, Illinois, Missouri. I've just been a part of so many, Ohio, Miami.
Sure.
But I'm telling you, this one, it's a different feel, man. And obviously the proximity of the campuses, maybe the closest one I could make analogous to the rivalry would be Xavier, Cincinnati, because of how close Jacob that is in terms of proximity. But it's unbelievable environment. It's a different game. And we acknowledge it as a different game. Obviously as coaches, we prepare the same way, diligently and all that. But we make no bones about it. That game's different. It's just different. It means a lot in the community. And it's been awesome to be a part of it.
Yeah, I've been to many of those games, and it is definitely a different atmosphere. Very palpable. There's not a lot of love lost between those two teams.
No, there's not.
And the players as well as the fans.
Yeah, no question.
And that's just it's great. And I'm glad to hear that that's recognizable by you and the coaching staff and the players. Like they know.
Oh, for
you
sure.
guys know that there's something different.
We don't shy away from that. It is what it is.
So that's question 20. I mean, question 22 was a banger. I mean, that was a great
22,
question.
man.
22.
Right, Taylor Swift.
All right,
22.
We'll do a couple
my
more.
Daughter.
We'll do a couple more of the coaches roulette, but then I have some others. So let's pick another number.
Pick another number. Okay, let's go with 18.
Okay.
And here's why 18. Because I'm getting an opportunity to coach my son.
Oh my goodness! Did you read my questions?
Who's a freshman. I can't believe it. Like the other day, our first real game on the road, Arkansas State, and he used to go to the pregame meal as someone traveling with me. My son, now he's a player.
Yeah.
It's like a totally different vibe and feel. But I will tell you, I lost my father in May.
Okay.
And so it's really made me appreciate just the fact that he's around every day. I mean, that I get to see him. My wife's jealous. She says, you get to spend more time with Connor than I do. So it's a real blessing to have him with us.
So question 18 is about being the parent of a child that plays sports. Wow. I'm no joke. This is question 18.
We're syncing up here.
Absolutely. This is that's why I was questioning if you got these in advance.
Yeah,
but I didn't share them with
not.
anyone. Okay, so as a parent of a child that plays sports, obviously you have one on the team. How do you separate that wearing the coach hat versus wearing the dad hat? Even before he came to play here.
Yeah.
Because I have kids that play sports, and it's hard to not coach on that ride home from the game. Like, hard. How do you separate that, especially now that Connor's on the team, of being, hey, I'm your dad, but I'm also your coach? Like, what's that balance like, and how has it been as your kids have grown up through sports?
It's been good. With Connor, we call it, he and I have a saying, coach mode and dad mode.
Okay.
And he knows when I'm in coach mode, trust me. So I think his ability from a maturity level standpoint to understand that he's been around it his whole life. He's felt wins, exhilarating wins. He's felt losses. He's felt all the different emotions that go into that, that he and your family feel. So he knows, he's been a part of it. So I try to separate, the two as best as I can, whether that's dad mode or coach mode.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's, again, as a parent of a kid, it's hard to separate those. And I'm not their coach, but I'm still, I want them to be successful, and trying to hesitate saying, you should have done this, should have done that. Like, just let them, hey, I'm your dad. I love you no matter how you played.
No question. What I tell them, like even my daughter, I have a freshman son, I always tell them when I get a chance to go watch them, regardless of outcome or maybe how they play individually or how the team does collectively, just tell them, man, I love watching you play. And my whole deal is I love watching them play as long as they play really hard and have a great attitude. That's all I care about.
100%.
And so I think that takes, obviously, hopefully some of the pressure off, because I'm aware of the fact, like even when Connor played at Revere for a great coach, Dean Rejas, at Revere, that I'm smart enough to know people know he's the coach's at Akron's son.
Yeah.
right? And some pressure comes with that. So I always tell him pressure's a privilege if you prepare the right way, and he does. And so I want to make them feel like, man, I want them to know that I enjoy, watching them play. I think that's important regardless of outcome.
And then how does that trickle into your players? Because, I mean, your relationship with them, in some cases, I'm your coach, but I'm your biggest fan too, probably, right? With former players. So not necessarily, the coach versus dad, but how do you kind of convey some of that dad stuff with the kids on your team?
I feel like our philosophy in terms of how I coach, it's this simple, really. It's like a two-sided coin. On one side is accountability, right? We're going to hold our guys accountable to the highest of standards. It's about our standards. It's not about outcomes. But the other side of the coin is unconditional love.
Sure.
And here's how they intersect or meet. I tell them, I love you so much that I'm not going to allow you to be mediocre at anything.
I love that.
Because if I love you like that, then why in the world would we ever accept mediocrity? Whether it's as a student, whether it's as a person, whether it's as a player, it doesn't matter. And you know what the coolest thing is, Jacob, and like the text I've gotten recently from guys like Freeman and Ali and Greg about where they're at now. Greg's in Macedonia, Ali's in England, Reek's with the Pacers, and what Akron means to them and what the culture of our program means to them and what it's taught them and how it's prepared them for what's next. That means the world to me.
Sure.
And that's
probably
so important.
Probably similar to a parent. When your kid gets off to
100%.
school, their first job,
Yeah.
it's probably that same
100%.
feeling. That's great. We're here with Coach Groce, head coach of the men's basketball team here on Zips Nation Insider. We're playing a fun game of Coach's Roulette. We got one more, and then I'm going to go through some other questions.
Let's do it.
Pick another number.
Another number.
By the way, we're in sync so far.
We are in sync so far. I'm going to go with 3 to represent the 3 MAC championships in the last 5 years. How's that for you?
You've done it again.
You gonna go with that? Let's go with 3.
I'm serious. This is related to that. Okay. Since joining the team, what has been your proudest moment as coach?
Wow. Really, probably what I just told you about, like Ali, Reek, and Greg, and the impact we've made long term. I would say this, and we obviously just talked about the 3 championships in 5 years. Those guys that just finished their 5-year run by percentage was the best winning percentage in the history of Akron basketball. Think about that, Jacob, for a second. Like, it hit me while I was on vacation. I'm thinking like, man, think about the great coaches like Danville, Huggins. Think about all the great players. We had the reunion this past summer. The Cricket was back. Eric McLaughlin was back. Joe Jakubik. All the great players we had during the Division II era and all that success with NCAA tournament appearances and national runner-ups and Elite Eights, and then Huggins' success in the 80s, and then Keith's success. And all the great players and coaches. You think about the greatest 5-year run, like, wow.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing.
It is.
So people gravitate to that. But for me, the most amazing statistic is 2 things. One, every player, scholarship player that's played for us in the 7 years when they finished have played professional basketball at least 1 or more years.
Wow.
All of them. Secondly, and most importantly, every one of them except for one who has 1 class left, and we're working to get that done, has graduated. That's exhausted their eligibility. So we're graduating guys, and guys are becoming pros, and they're winning on the court and off the court. When you put all that together, it's like, I'm proud of that.
Sure,
especially those 2 statistics about graduation and having a chance to get paid to play professional basketball when they're done.
Yeah, there's a stewardship you have. Like, you have a stewardship. I
No
mean, that's
question.
a way to describe it. And I was thinking about the teams recently, and quite frankly, you mentioned the winning percentage. You had one team, and part of the question was, how good was that 2019-2020 team that got cut off with COVID? Like, how?
Yeah, I mean,
that was a fun team to watch.
It was. I appreciate those guys so much. We call them the Trailblazers because what we were selling, what we just talked about, professional basketball, graduation from a great university, winning championships, we hadn't done any of that yet.
Yeah.
And those guys believed, and they came in, Christian Jackson, Dang Riak, Zarius Williams, Tyler Cheese, Channel Banks, and they believed Almost like, hey, have faith, fellas. We don't have evidence yet, but it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And it did, and they started it. And for those guys not to get an opportunity with how good that team was to compete in Cleveland and the potential of beyond is almost a travesty. But what I always say is I keep it in perspective. When you think about their season was canceled, but you think about what other people were going through with COVID,
Sure.
like it puts it in perspective real fast. But one of the coolest stories, I'll share this with you, in 2022, we're about ready to close it out in Cleveland. It almost makes me tear up to this day. But in the last time out, Brian Dennison brings in his cell phone.
Oh, wow.
And on FaceTime is Cheese,
Are you serious?
Banks, Jackson.
In the locker room at the
No, they're in the huddle at Rocket Mortgage.
Oh, my goodness.
At the last time out, when Freeman says, hey, fellas, we're looking those guys in the eyes. We're going to close this out with class, and we're going to shake their hand and do what we do.
Chills, Coach.
So those guys were in the huddle on FaceTime.
Oh, that's awesome.
4 of them celebrating. And after the game, obviously, Freeman and Ali and Greg and Mike and all those guys, all those guys basically honored those guys in the press conference and said, hey, here's what those guys taught us. They didn't get this opportunity we had tonight, so this is for them.
Yeah.
So there's certainly a respect level our guys have for the guys who came before them and who started it. Like the other night we played, and I probably shouldn't say this because Greg and Ali and all those guys, coaches, they're overseas. They're hours ahead.
Yeah.
They're all watching.
They're all watching the game.
They're texting me after the game, They're watching it because they're proud of what they've been a part of. And now they're hoping the next set of guys can pass that torch and pay it forward to the next set of guys.
Sure. That's a great story. I don't know if that's not known as far as I haven't heard about in the huddle with the FaceTime.
It was a special moment.
Oh my, I can imagine. Again, with that team, their ability to kind of close it out, right? They got so far, but weren't really able to close it, to have kind of their reward, so to speak, to be able to be part of that. Oh, what a cool story. Thanks for sharing that, Coach.
No, it was an awesome experience.
Appreciate it. Yeah, my son, Colin, who's 12, Tyler Cheese was his favorite.
Great player. Yeah, great player. He was back this summer for the reunion.
Yeah, Channel Banks, those two. For some reason, I don't know what stuck out to him. Of all the players on that team, he big fan of those guys.
They're special guys, man. Those guys we had them all back this summer. With the reunion was awesome. Carl Schwartzinger, one of our alums who played here, did such a great job with our development team of Camden and Samantha to put it together. And it was packed house over at the Student Union, and it was awesome. Coach Tressel participated. I was so thankful for that. Hugs was there. His 80s team that went to the NCAA tournament here at Akron was back. Coach Dambrot was back on campus. A lot of his players, our guys. It was an awesome night. It was really special.
You guys, this week, you're doing the voiceover of a video about some of those people coming back. That was a great video.
Oh, unreal.
I mean,
Wentz Financial Group did a great job with that. Nolan did a great job with it. It was really, really good. And it really makes you, and I told the guys the other day we weren't having a very good practice, and I looked up at the banners, and I was thinking about that video. It was fresh on my mind.
Sure.
Like, hey, guys, man, we got an obligation that's bigger than ourselves. I'm not accepting mediocrity. I owe those guys up there that won those banners, that put the banners in the arena. We owe them that. You owe yourself that.
Yeah.
We're not settling for anything less than excellence here, period. So the one thing I love about being here, and I knew it when I took the job, is there's pressure. But I always tell them pressure's a privilege, and preparation trumps pressure. So if we're prepared, let's go let it ride.
Yeah.
And that's kind of been our approach. Then the score will take care of itself.